But in my experience, going all the way back to the early 1970s, and silver bugs are always impatient. And every single recovery I've been through, this is my ninth, the silver bugs say, when is silver going to move? When is silver going to move? When is silver going to move? The answer is simple, when it does.
Yeah.
But silver in 8 prior recoveries has moved further than gold, and it's moved faster once it starts moving.
Hello there, my friends. Chris Marcus here with you for Arcadia Economics. And certainly as a lot of interesting things happening in the gold and silver market, and makes it exciting to have Rick Rule, head of Sprott Global, join me today. One of the true experts out there who's been seeing this for so long. And Rick, it's a pleasure to have you on here. How's everything going with you in these interesting times we're living in?
Chris, I'm delighted to be back. It's interesting to see all of the things that you and I have talked about in the various interviews over the last couple of years coming true, coming into place. When I say interesting, I guess I could say it's a little scary too, but since it had to happen, I'm glad it's happening on schedule. And I'm glad, frankly, that the discussions that you and I have been having over time, had people listened to them and acted on them, would have been beneficial to your audience. I feel very good about that.
Well, I sure appreciate them, and especially the last one we did in New Orleans, where we didn't talk finances much, but a lot of some of the skills that go into succeeding, not just in investing, anything in life. I have reviewed that several times. In fact, I'm more than 50% through, and actually my net profitability has gone up quite a bit already. Interesting, a lot of life lessons in there, and we'll get to, you have a big party coming up, the Sprott Symposium, in a couple of weeks, which I know folks are excited for. And one of the topics hopefully we'll be digging into there is, of course, the silver market, where I'm curious what you see going on there. You see a lot of the inflows into your trust and elsewhere, and thoughts on silver right now.
Well, you know, my experience, and of course, every bull market can be different. But in my experience, going all the way back to the early 1970s, the first precious metal to move is gold, because it moves on fear, and specifically fear of debasement of the purchasing power of your savings. After the momentum has been achieved by gold, silver moves. And silver bugs are always impatient. And every single recovery I've been through, this is my ninth, the silver bugs say, when is silver going to move? When is silver going to move? When is silver going to move? The answer is simple, when it does.
Yeah.
Silver moves after gold because gold has to establish the narrative and the momentum. But silver in 8 prior recoveries has moved further than gold, and it's moved faster once it starts moving. There's no guarantee that 2020 or 2021 is going to follow the pattern established by 8 prior recoveries since 1970. But the statistics would say that the market will act the same way. Remembering that silver is traditionally more volatile, people expect it to be more volatile, but also because the unit cost of silver is lower, it's a more democratic way, if you will, a more equitable way of storing purchasing power, and as a consequence is accessible to more people, particularly in the emerging markets and frontier markets. And one more thing, Chris, that I think will be different with this market than prior markets. What people forget is that over the last 30 years, the bottom 2 billion people on the demographic pyramid, the poorest of the poor, the people who live in emerging and frontier markets, although they are still absolutely very poor, are much less poor than they were 30 years ago. So the idea that the participation of the bottom 2 billion people in the demographic pyramid, the idea that those people now have some earnings and some savings to store in silver, suggests that maybe, I'm not saying definitely, but maybe this is the best silver market we'll ever see.
You know where I stand on that one. So, and especially when you think about what would if you could set up the ideal conditions to hit number 9 in a row, I mean, you have Fed can't even tell you how much they're going to print. But even aside from that, now we have gold broaching 1800. Rick, I know you're familiar with how Americans like investing on momentum, buying high, selling low. But I mean, what happens once you hit 1900, which and past that all-time high, I think is a historic event, let alone gold at 2000. And it feels, I wonder if it's going to be like the herd flocking at some point in silver and we see some sort of gap. What do you think about that?
You know, Chris, you and I spend a lot of time talking to each other. It's sort of like a pastor asking the choir if they believe in God. And we think that everybody is familiar with the investment proposition offered up by precious metals. The truth is that most American investors can't spell gold, despite the fact that it's only a 4-letter word. Gold is very, very, very underowned. There was a study published a year and a half or 2 years ago that suggested that the market share of precious metals and precious metals related assets in the US savings and investment matrix was between 1/3 and 1/2 of 1%. The similar market share in 1981, the top of the mother of all bull markets, was about 7%. But more importantly, the 3-decade mean was between 1.5% and 2%. So I'm not suggesting that the whole world has to pile into gold, that it replaces the US dollar or anything like that. What I believe happens is that precious metals revert to mean. And if they revert to mean, demand for precious metals and precious metals related assets will triple or quadruple in the biggest savings and investment market in the world. That's what I think is going to happen. And yes, as a matter of fact, we've talked about this before. Gold is a Geffen good in the sense that when the price goes up, while it is absolutely less attractive in arithmetic terms, it's more attractive in narrative terms because the price action justifies the narrative. And I suspect that this bull market will be the way that all prior bull markets have been, which means that the momentum moves will go on ad infinitum, ad nauseum.
Yeah, and then of course you toss in some leverage and away we go. I'm curious, to any degree you can comment, what are you seeing in terms of the Sprott Trust? Are people going, when they have X number of dollars, is it half and half in gold and silver? Are people buying, what's that look like?
Gold has substantially outpaced silver, which is what you suspect in the early stages of a bull market. It's unfolding exactly the way history suggests to us that it will. Mm-hmm. The early buyers, at least among the generalists, are fear buyers, not greed buyers. They're not trying to buy momentum. They're trying to defend their purchasing power. They are generalist managers in many cases. We're talking to registered investment advisors who manage a couple $2 billion and whose current precious metal allocation is 0. Yeah. And they have decided to take their allocation for some conservative clients up to 2%. They are not interested in the momentum offered by silver. They're not interested in the gold-silver ratio. They are just now beginning to be scared of negative interest rates, of quantitative easing, of the disconnect between the fortunes of Wall Street and the fortunes of Main Street. Just now. And it makes perfect sense that those people would be fear buyers. They'd be gold buyers. When gold establishes the momentum, and make no mistake, it's beginning to establish momentum now. When gold establishes its momentum, you will see it pile over to silver. I'd like on that subject, Chris, to address some of your younger listeners. While the millennials, I think, will develop probably into the best investing generation that we've ever seen because of their access to information. What millennials lack is the gray hair or maybe the exposed palate, the experience. This bull market in gold, in silver, and in gold and silver stocks will not be a one-way street. This will be an extremely volatile market. You will see periods, quarters that are off by 15% or 20%. I remember in my first gold bull market in the 1970s, the price went from 1970 to early 1975. It went from 35 bucks to 200 bucks. So that price action really justified the narrative, right? And there were many tried and true firm believers in gold at 200. 1975, the price of gold fell from 200 to 100. In 9 months, we wiped out 50% of the gains. And all those true believers turned into gold haters. They sold the gold that they bought at 175 out at 105, and then missed a gold bull market that went from 100 to 850. Beware volatility, and beware your reaction to volatility. The best is yet to come, but you will be tested. I guarantee it.
Yeah, well, that's great advice. I mean, we saw that for people who have seen the movie The Big Short. They got a great return, but they were all challenged. And then, I don't know, I mean, you've talked about uranium before. Either we stop using electricity or the price goes up. So some of these things, can we imagine if we could just sleep for take a nap for 5 or 10 years, leave your stuff there, don't click on it every day, stop clicking your Kitco chart. So I appreciate you mentioning that, because as I get a little older and wiser, hopefully I see how much it's really our own emotions. The rest of the stuff sorts itself out. Although in terms of money that's going into silver, I believe the quote was, you said you'd be amused to see if somebody ever did stand for delivery. And at least according to the surface of the reports that have been released in the last 3 days, we see COMEX Silver list 65 million ounces in the last 3 days. SLV Trust and the other silver trusts show 24 million ounces. So that's 90 million ounces in 3 days in a market that Silver Institute shows 100 million ounce deficit last year, which, again, take the numbers with a grain of salt. But where's this metal come from?
Well, right now, London. The London bullion markets in both gold and silver have been the source of metal. In the United States, in North America, really, retail demand has meant that there have been incredible shortages in retail product, 1 ounce product, 100-gram product. We have been able, when I say we, I mean Sprott, we have been able to buy kilo product, 400-ounce product, wholesale product. Mm-hmm. But what's happened in London has been that the big trade for London has been to ship wholesale product from London to Switzerland, melt that product down, recast it into retail product, and sell it in Asia. The COVID-19 virus has shut down those Swiss refiners. And so the London market at a wholesale level has been oversupplied. The North American markets have been undersupplied. And so at Sprott, we have been able to buy as much as $50 million worth of metal a day. That isn't to say it hasn't been challenging. It's been amazingly challenging, but we've been able to do it. The circumstance that you described, though, for this contract period is interesting, because in order to satisfy the good delivery requirements, it doesn't just need to be silver. It needs to be in-system silver, which is to say it needs to have been in bonded warehouses so that the recipient of the silver knows that the silver that he or she buys is not titanium or something like that, painted with silver on the outside. All of the silver in the world, silver held in retail hands in India, as an example, could eventually become good delivery, but it would need to be at least assayed and very commonly re-refined. And that doesn't happen within a good delivery period. If we continue with a circumstance where people are standing for delivery of contracts, it's going to be a very, very interesting silver market. I don't want to be, quoted in the popular press as saying huge impending short squeeze on silver and anything like that. I'm just pointing out the fact that the near-term futures market frequently trades 100 times the volume of good delivery inventory a day. And that doesn't leave a lot of room left over for error.
Yeah, especially when the big chunk of the silver supply shut down earlier this year. Although, fortunately, Rick, I appreciate you put together the party of the year at the upcoming Sprott Symposium in just a few weeks, where I'll be at the Miles Franklin booth and you have experts from around the world. So if anyone wants to know or talk more about silver, you're experts on any of these topics. So could you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. You know, for about 30 years, Sprott has been a participant, and for the last 8 years, the producer of the Vancouver Natural Resources Investment Symposium. It's had my face on it for 3 decades, so I'm going to tell you that I believe it's the best all-around natural resource symposium on the planet. Other people's opinion might vary. Um, we cover all aspects of precious metals and natural resource investing, from the metals themselves to the underlying economies to industrial materials like base metals, oil and gas, and uranium. Importantly, yes, we have all the big gurus, you know, Daniela DiMartino Booth, Jim Rickards, all those types of people, Doug Casey. We also have industry people, but most importantly, I think, we have serially successful CEOs who have built major mining and oil and gas companies, talking about the lessons that they've learned building their companies and how that impacts their investment decisions and how it should impact yours. The other thing that we do that our attendees have always appreciated is that every exhibitor at our conference, every public company exhibitor, is owned in a Sprott account. Now, that doesn't mean that every stock that Sprott picks goes up, sadly, although we've had a hell of a year.
Yeah.
But what it does mean is that we vetted every single exhibitor. We know them well enough that we own them. We're at risk on them. And people have liked that. But I'm going to go a step further for your listeners. You know, this is the first time that we've ever done a virtual conference. Every other conference has been live. We've been there. And there are advantages to live conferences. I had an attendee tell me last year that walking around the exhibit floor, following Ross Beatty and then following Robert Friedland to see what booths they went to,
Yep.
was worth more than the cost of admission.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to be able to do that this year because we're not going to be there. And we're not going to be able to take our good friends like Chris Marcus out on a boat in the harbor and drink alcohol and look at the wonderful Vancouver skyline. We're not going to be able to do that. But what we are going to be is we're going to be freed from the tyranny of time, in the sense that if there are 4 workshops going on and you can't decide between 2 of them, you can toggle back and forth between them and attend one on a delay. So there will be advantages in technology. But I'm going to take the risk away from your listeners. Anyone who is a paid attendee at our conference, who at the end of the conference doesn't think they got their money's worth, can email me and say, you said on Chris Marcus' show that if I didn't think I got my money's worth, that you would refund me my money. Money back guarantee. If you don't get your money's worth, you don't pay. Now, you know, don't take advantage. I'm not trying to give people a free show. But if for any reason the technology doesn't work for you and the content doesn't work for you and you didn't get value, you don't have to pay.
Well, fortunately, I was digging around in the software the other day, testing a few things out, getting our Miles booth set up, and it's actually pretty neat. You can see, it's like you said, one of the challenges with the conference, there's sometimes so many things going on, and I think people will love it. It's, you know, some people go to fantasy camp so they can play baseball with Mickey Mantle, and, you know, if you like gold and silver and want to really interact with people, so many of whom, you know, you're reading their newsletters and investing in these companies. Well, the link is in the description field below. You can click there to get your ticket today. Rick, I appreciate you joining me here today. I'm excited to follow the silver market. I think whatever people do and invest, not what I think or Rick thinks, but what you think is right, but just from the standpoint of some truly historic fascinating events that so many people in this sector have been excited about. So I think it's going to be a fantastic time at the conference, and I'll look forward to seeing you there.
Chris, if I might leave your listeners with one more offer. We've done this before, and your listeners have taken advantage of it.
Yes.
I personally am willing for any of your listeners who care to review their natural resource portfolio. I'll rank the companies in their portfolio 1 to 10, 1 being worst, 1 being best, pardon me, 10 being worst, and comment on those issuers where I think my comments might have value. I will include a 100-year commodity chart, which will put our conference and what we do for a living into perspective. And I will send the listeners to a 45-year precious metals equities chart, the Barron's Gold Mining Index chart. All your listeners need do is go to sprottusa.com/rankings and list their natural resource stocks, and I will personally rank them and send them back. The caveat is that this offer has been so popular that I'm about 1,000 rankings behind. And in addition to responding to all these requests, I need to update the rankings database continually. So be patient. You will get a response. I do look forward to doing this, and I've been overwhelmed with positive emails with regards to the service. People absolutely love it, although some of them occasionally criticize me for my tardy response.
Well, it's funny. I'd been wondering if you have someone who already has the list and ranks it. I appreciate that you're actually going through doing those yourself. And if one day you run into some request from a guy named Chris from Denver, and it's about silver stocks, and when silver hits 50, what do you want to own? I don't know who that is. So Rick, thanks again for joining me. And we will all look forward to seeing you online at the Sprott Symposium, and that and the rankings offer in the description below. And we'll be looking forward to it.
Well, thanks for the interview. Thanks for your preparation for the interview. And thanks for all the fine work you do for your listeners.